Essentially, what we said yesterday was that for some strange reason, when you speak, you generate more light of your intellect, which is an anomaly, because basically, when you sort of hatch the seed of chokhmah from the koach hamaskil, what is the koach hamaskil? It is the chokhmah of Kesser. I think I wanted actually to sort of tweak it yesterday, because yesterday we said it was the Kesser of chokhmah, which is not exactly as exact as it should be. What koach hamaskil usually is described as is the sphere of chokhmah in Kesser, right? So chokhmah of Kesser, and the idea is that Kesser in general is something which is beyond intellect, right? Kesser is chokhmah only begins after Kesser. So the whole idea of Kesser is something which is intrinsically beyond intellect. The fact that there's a chokhmah of Kesser, right, is kind of an anomaly, because the sphere of Kesser is beyond chokhmah. Nonetheless, it's the source of chokhmah which is beyond the intellect, and we call that the koach hamaskil. So we got through. It's going to come up in today's class, and it came up in yesterday's class. The idea is that the koach hamaskil, it means the power. Literally, the word mean haskil to make intellect. So a drop of intellect, like this seed of intellect, comes out of this unseen source, and it comes into your mind as a flash of chokhmah. This is like a seed of a tree, seed of a man, right? And so ultimately, when this seed will develop itself, it already has in its source all the information, all the DNA, all of the data that is ever going to be, right? And the seeming process is that it would just come from a state of potential to actual and unfold, and it would get to the bottom. And by the time it got to the bottom, it would reveal everything that's in the top, and that's it. You've completed your task. What do we see, however? He says we see with our senses even. You can sort of experience this yourself. You don't have to look in books. That when you speak, suddenly, from the mere faculty of speech, you wind up inputting more information, excitement, intelligence, etc., everything that's possible inside of this development than was even in its original source in the seed of chokhmah. So by the time you develop the whole thing, when you speak it out, somehow there's an influx of more chokhmah into this idea than there was even in the original drop of chokhmah in its source. And that's a very strange thing. But this is like the power of speech. We're bringing this up in a series of conversations about the idea how bina yeser nosenes isha. There's an extra bina given to the woman, just like we're talking about speech as the makabel from your seichel and your midos. So too, there's the idea of the woman that can take this drop, right, of the man and somehow develop it in a similar way, where we're going to see like wondrous powers come out of this creation, more than was situated in the seed that the man produced. Because we said even the seed that the man produces, no matter, even after producing the whole thing, it cannot create a new entity. It requires this woman to bring the new entity. The woman is like malchus, is like speech. And so we're seeing that the whole idea of speech is basically a mashal to explain how we can see a new influx even in the original set based on the contribution of the makabel. So far, everyone understands. There's a review from yesterday. Okay, let's go inside. We're going to take it from page Vav, the second paragraph down. Tzrich. We talked about it in the classes. Bina Yisera Nosenes L'Isha. We spoke about this, right? Yes. You'll do a little review over there. I'm sure you underlined that one. Okay. So, Tzrich Lahavin. Dahainu. Or trichlios, dahainu, lefi shekol giloi or seichel, every revelation of a light of intellect, hanimshach makoro, which is drawn out of its source. What is the source of intellect? We just got through saying shuhu hakoach hamaskil, right? Underline that word. This is any light of intellect that is drawn out of its source, which is the koach hamaskil, which is refers to what? Chokhmah of Kesser, right? Anything that's going to come out of that source, it's only going to reveal what we call Efes Katsehu, which means Literally, it means a nothing of an edge, which is a kind of a poetic way of saying, like, basically, you're not getting very much out of this thing, right? Whatever the source of the Koach HaMaskil is actually going to let you see, which is what shows up in this drop called Chokhmah, it's really practically nothing of the Koach HaMaskil. It doesn't show you all of its goodies, right? It brings out a minute, tiny ray, the Ephes Katsehu. The Kiyadua, as is known, the Mashev Shalavoli de Giloi, Mikoach HaMaskil, B'derech Or Yashar, that what is able to come out and reveal itself in a revealed way from the Koach HaMaskil in what we call an Or Yashar. What's an Or Yashar here? Straight light, thank you. What does it mean? It means basically the planned, natural delivery, like when, for example, a professor, a rabbi will come and prepare his class, he has it all organized what he wants to say, and he just gives it from above to below. We normally talk about Or Yashar being a scenario from above to below. The Or Choser is the alternative of the Or Yashar, which means the returning light, which means this is a light which the rabbi is going to give out, having been challenged, right? Having given the Or Yashar, and then what does the Or Choser mean? It means to return. It means something's been like sort of reflected back to him, which then requires somehow an answer to a difficult question. That's something that he did not prepare originally. That's a light that comes from having been returned a problem and having to go deeper into himself, right? So that's sort of, we're not quite up to that yet, but the idea of the Or Yashar is just a natural state of delivery that comes from the source. Like, for example, I guess let's take a look at the sun. When the sun gives off a ray, right, when it comes out, it's not as powerful, actually, as when it hits the surface of an object and then reflects back. They call that, I believe, the greenhouse effect, right? That it all of a sudden has a stronger light, a stronger energy, right, upon returning. So it's something strange that when the information comes out, it's weaker than when it actually comes back. And so too, in this scenario of a person who's producing light, the Or Choser is something that he delivers having been challenged. But in the meantime, when you're just going to get an Or Yashar coming out of the Koach HaMaskil, it's known that it only delivers a tiny, tiny ray of its actual full capability. You don't deliver everything you've got. Right? So back to that sentence, from the light as it comes out in and of itself, without, again, being triggered by something else, right? Without something which is forcing it to give hashpah, right? So you give more and deeper hashpah when it comes as like being forced from you, like when someone's asking you questions and challenging you, than when you just deliver on your own. What is deliverable on your own? It's merely a external ray alone. That's what's able to come out and reveal itself. But its very inner essence of the Koach HaMaskil, it doesn't just come out on its own. Something has to trigger it, and something has to sort of demand it to come out and like wrestle with it in order to get its real essence to come out. Something maybe you can apply would be, the mashal that we normally give about a coal versus a flintstone, right? A burning coal, it has sort of fire inside of it, even though the coal's dimmed down and it's almost dead. The fire is sitting in there like ready to come out. It doesn't require very much effort on our part to bring it out. It's more or less ready to shine because there's already fire near to the surface. Whereas if you have a regular rock, you want to bring a spark out of it, you have to smash another stone against it. This type of like forced effort to go into the depths of it and pull out its hashpah, that will bring out a much, much deeper hashpah, right? So the essence of the Koach HaMaskil is not at the ready to just be delivered to you, right? So whatever comes into your mind just drops into your head like a gift from heaven, little chokhmah ideas. You should know that's the external like drippings of the Koach HaMaskil, and it's not really all of its flower, right? So when you're going to start challenging that idea and basically wrestling either with yourself or some student is going to wrestle with you. It's going to force you to go deeper into your koach hamaskil and produce a much stronger revelation. That would be the panemius that comes out from an or choser. Everyone following this? Anyone not following this? You get it? Yeah? Simple. The hainu rak bechinas chitzonius levad, what comes out on its own, however, is merely the external. I do want to point out, because it's just an awesome thing that I just reminded myself of, is that this koach hamaskil is basically like it's like almost like the collective human consciousness that we all share. I'm serious. I don't mean to be using fancy words, but where these ideas come from, right? There's like the source of all knowledge, and whenever you have a little idea, which is a chokhmah drop into your mind, you're getting a tiny drop from all collective consciousness of like that can be known, right? And that collective consciousness that can be known, it's an awesome thing. It's inside of you as well. It's like the deep inner recesses. You know, like they say, like we only use like small percentage of the human brain. The rest of your brain basically is like contains the entire knowledge of all things that could ever be. Thing is, it's like sort of blocked to you. However, those who can use their brain and have developed their brain, they have more access to it and more access to it. But essentially, even if you have access to it, you only access you ever get is what shows up in your faculty of chokhmah as some kind of a revelation from it. In and of itself is always a hidden thing. It's always like in the deep recesses. We're only always getting rays of it. The only thing is you get a deeper ray or a less deeper ray. In Ayin Base, after a lot of meandering around with this idea, the Rebbe Rashab, the same Rebbe we're talking about, he basically outs himself and he explains that what is a Rebbe really? A Rebbe is a person whose conscious chokhmah that we all have as like little drops from the koach hamaskil, his actual brain is the koach hamaskil. In other words, he is the collective consciousness of all knowledge that can ever be known, past, present, and future. That's what he's thinking right now. And whenever you're going to have like a drop of wisdom, it's basically a drop of his brain, which you have inside of your own brain. It's just to you, it's like a closed, sealed safe. That's what a Rebbe is. And basically that's why he like knows you before you get there. He knows everything and he's like, can answer any question under the sun, past, present, and future, and do miracles. He's holding on to the collective human consciousness. This is called the koach hamaskil. By him, it's not hidden. It's his actual reality. Anyway, I just love that idea. L'chaim. Okay, back to the plot. You only get chitzonius from this or yashar in the parentheses. Yes, imlo aidei kushios. I'm sorry. Or yashar is the straight light, not the returning light. The returning light gives you a deeper, essential, panemius revelation from the koach hamaskil. And now he says, what is a returning light? He says in the parentheses right here. Doesn't really, yeah, he does mention the word or choser. Im lo aidei kushios vehelmos vestardim. Now, when is it you can get a little bit more than just a tiny external ray from the koach hamaskil? If you only get an external unless im lo through kushios vehelmos vestardim. Unless someone takes this seed you decide to deliver to your classmates, and they start challenging you, right? They give you kushios, not kisses. They give you difficult challenges. And helmos vestardim, all of a sudden you hatch this idea, and everyone and their mother is going to come and tell you how it's a terrible idea and it doesn't make sense. And this one's got a question, and that one's got a question. But what about what I read in this Gemara? How about what I read in this Tanya? Everything you're saying doesn't make sense. So what do you have to do all of a sudden? You are forced to go, if you want to defend your thesis and your idea, you have to go to a deep, deep place where you can resolve all those issues. And that means you have to go to a much deeper, remember we talked about yesterday, the depth of the idea. If you go plumbing the depth of the idea, you'll find that all these contradictions, like we said in yesterday's class, maybe they're actually complementary. Maybe they're not even contradicting each other. If you bring a new light, it could be that they're actually two prongs of the same fork, and they're all even one idea. So that is talking about deepening your relationship with your koach hamaskil, getting to the panemius. That comes through the hainu misad koach or choser. That's what we mean in the process of or choser. That you got to go back up in there. And right, just in general, if you think about something that comes from above to below versus something that comes from below to above, what's the simple difference if you're talking about Hashem? When something comes from above to below, there's some kind of a source that it's coming from, and there's some kind of an end where it's reaching. When you go to below to above, the source is coming from, fine, you're the source, the questioner. But then when it's returning back into God, is there a source, that end point in the Or Ein Sof? No. So theoretically, from questions, you can send a message without a limit. And therefore, when you go into Or Choser, just naturally, there's nothing to block it. So it goes into an infinite depth if you want to go deep. In other words, at the end of the day, we're going to answer the question, why is there evil in the world? Why is negativity happen? What is going on here? Nothing makes sense. We're basically standing here questioning God. We'll question deep enough. Another year of Galus, Chas v'Shalom. Eventually, there's going to be a deep, deep answer because God is infinite, which will resolve these questions. That's the idea of just going infinitely inside. This is called Ur Choser. Noah. What's what? Helem is concealment. Helem v'hester. What's that?
What does it mean here?
It means the same thing it means everywhere. Helemos, concealment, right? Like the word helem.
Right, of course, but just what it doesn't go in the context.
Oh, because when we're saying when there's questions, difficulties, or helem v'hester means all those things I just said. In other words, when someone's concealing the clarity of the idea you wanted to bring forth, right? It means concealed. Like, in other words, the idea is not clear. So therefore someone challenges it because there's a Helen Behester in his mind. He didn't understand what it meant. Ki'im, right? So we're back to the idea of what normally happens with the Or Yashar, light from the Koach HaMaskil, which you only get an external ray, right? Ki'im ayidei dibur dafka. However, when you speak, again, for some strange reason, this anomaly, that even though the Or Yashar gets lower and lower and smaller, and it's limited, suddenly when you verbalize it, this adds this wondrous power of speech we've been talking about before, that amplifies it. It makes suddenly new ideas come out of your mouth that weren't there in the beginning. How is that possible? We're finally getting clued in. It's tapping into the Koach HaMaskil somehow, and it's drawing from a deeper, panemius place in the Koach HaMaskil. That's our answer why suddenly you can bring more energy into this idea than was even found in the source. Because when it first came out of its source, from the Koach HaMaskil to the Chokhmah in your brain, that was a tiny, limited ray. When you suddenly speak it taps, something about the speech taps back up into the Koach HaMaskil and pulls out more from a more panemius place in that very Koach HaMaskil. The idea, therefore, gets enriched from its own source.
The Koach HaMaskil is the collective thought.
We're calling it the Chokhmah of Keser, which is basically and that's fancy words, but what does it mean? If there's Chokhmah there's Keser and then Chokhmah in general in the Spheros, right? So if there's Chokhmah of Keser, what does that really mean? It's the source of the Chokhmah that's after Keser. Inside of Keser, there's a little Chokhmah. It's not Chokhmah, because again, as I said in the earlier part of the class, Keser is above Tam V'das, it's above intellect. Keser is like will or pleasure, right? It's not an intellectual faculty. Nonetheless, there's something inside of there called the Chokhmah of Keser. The fact that it's the Chokhmah of Keser means it's not regular intellect, it's Keser level stuff. But nonetheless, if there's going to be a Chokhmah that comes out, there has to be a source of that Chokhmah somewhere. The source of that Chokhmah is an aspect of Chokhmah which is beyond intellect. It's a Keser type of Chokhmah. It's not a regular Chokhmah. And therefore, when you have the Chokhmah that comes into your brain, that's a regular type of Chokhmah. Albeit, Chokhmah is a very refined intellect, more than, let's say, Bina, but it's still something that is intellectual. We can call it an idea. But when you go into the Chokhmah of Keser, that's not really called an idea. It's something beyond intellect. It's just that there's the source of the intellect there. So when you go up there, you're going to draw from Chokhmah of Keser. It means you're going to make an influx from the unknowable into your Chokhmah faculty. And that's what you're doing. You're basically producing more from the source of Chokhmah, which is Koach HaMaskil.
Is Chokhmah of Keser Koach HaMaskil?
Yes.
Chokhmah of Keser, is that your thoughts, or is that you said something about the
again,
human consciousness?
You have the collective human consciousness inside of you. So it's just that by you, it's all like a closed book. If you were the Rebbe, that collective human consciousness would be your conscious though. right? So it is inside of us all. And we all have a little Rebbe inside of us, right? Little Moshe and me, right? But the idea is that for us, we only get to see it from after the curtain. We don't get to see behind the curtain. But what we can do is go and draw from behind the curtain in bigger or smaller doses. So when you, for example, speak, as opposed to just think the idea through, something about the speech triggers the koach hamaskil to give you a deeper dose of that very same idea from behind the curtain. From the koach hamaskil, the chokhmah of Keser. Yes.
Why do you not say it's rooted in Keser of Keser?
What is rooted in Keser of Keser? Because that's a good question. Because Keser of Keser is like does different stuff, right? The idea of koach hamaskil is that we're talking about the source of intellect. Now we're dealing with something which is Keser, which is beyond intellect. But in Keser, right, there's also the source of emotions. There's also something called chesed of Keser, right? So when you have an emotion, so there's some source of emotion which is not emotion, which is going to deliver you an emotion. When you're talking about chokhmah, you're talking about some source of chokhmah, which is not chokhmah, which is going to deliver you some chokhmah. Keser of Keser has nothing to do with intellect. It's not even the chokhmah of the Keser. It's the Keser of the Keser. So why would the Keser of the Keser be the source of your chokhmah? The chokhmah of the Keser is the source of your chokhmah. You understand what I'm saying? Because it's at least in the brand called intellect. Keser of Keser is not even in the brand of intellect. So maybe Keser of Keser in some level is the source of chokhmah of Keser. But if we're looking at what's going on in your brain, you have a chokhmah, and you say, where in Keser is the source of this chokhmah? Doesn't it make sense that it's chokhmah of Keser? Okay.
What would be chokhmah of Keser in layman's terms?
I just told you basically what chokhmah of Keser is. I don't have any further layman's terms. If we keep talking, the dibur will bring it down lower and lower. That's what we learned. Yeah.
When the dibur comes out, is there a second flash chokhmah, or is it like just developing the same flash?
No, it's not a new egg, right? It's that in that same chokhmah, you get to a panemius level of it that was not available to you before, right? A new chokhmah flash would be a new idea, right? Okay, can we continue here? We're inside. So only somehow speech taps up into this place and brings out this new thing. Hi nulafisha osios hadibor. And why is that? Because the letters of speech machrichim es koach hachochma she's gali yoser v'mashu yichol yizgalos mitzad atzmo chula. Because, and actually, Yosef, you kept saying this, and I kept kind of like ignoring you because I didn't want to bring it out until it was time. But you're saying like you force yourself to speak. Remember, you were saying you used that lesson a couple times. Like you don't have to speak. When you're going to speak, it's like it's an extra like schlep that you have to bring your idea down into. Okay, let me explain. Like you just did. We just went through this process right now. You're like, can you say that again in layman's terms? I was like, no, I don't really feel like it. Right? It would be a big schlep. Because speaking is basically forcing yourself to it's a burden to bring the thing out one more level, right? Of speech, especially if you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's like a forcing. So what did we just say a second ago when it comes to forcing versus the natural ease coming out from the koach hamaskil? Speaking is a little version of a student asking a question and basically giving resistance to the idea coming out. When a student asks a question, right, it's like, I'm happy to give you this information, but no, you're giving me resistance. Like, no, I'm just asked. This is called kushios, helem v'hester. You're creating concealments in my friendly, delivery over here. You're not letting it just be. You're forcing more to come out. That forcing is what we said makes it go to the panemius. And why is that? Because you're making me bring it lower. You found a place where the light of my idea did not reach. Part of your brain was like, no, I'm not enlightened. I needed to hear it in layman's terms. So therefore, it's like you're forcing me to come deeper into the idea. Same thing happens on your own without any students around, just when you speak. Because when you bring it out into your mouth, that is basically forcing it to come deeper. You're bringing it into like a medium which leaves your goof. It goes into breath and letters. And that very nature of having to come and gashmiatize the idea into physicality is essentially forcing a deeper mining of the koach hamaskil. And there, we got to it, right? This is the secret. Why? This anomaly of speech causes further intellect to come out, because it's like a or choser. When you speak to yourself, it's creating a need to go back in and dig from a deeper place in order to get it to come out of your mouth. Like the rubber band effect. Right? So this is what he says. The letters of speech, they force the power of chokhmah, she's galiyosa, that it should be more revealed. From that which was able to be revealed mitzad atzma on its own, if you didn't have to force it into speech. Speech is clumsy. And therefore, when this light of intellect comes into the speech, therefore, automatically, it comes to the depth, it plumbs the depth of the idea. That even those aspects of the idea which you could not reach, even though you meditated deeply in your own thoughts. Again, it's kind of a wild concept. You would think, I remember asking Rabbi Goldberg from Hadar Torah. He once had this professor come into the yeshiva for like a week of learning or something. And he's like, you guys are crazy. I walk into this place and everyone's screaming, and one with a partner, and you can't even hear yourself think. You go into a library where I'm accustomed to sending my students, you can hear a pin drop. And he says that is because where we come from, we call this a seminary, but where you come from, it's called a cemetery. I don't forget that, and even the accent I remember. No, it's true. That's how they learn, like by going. Because it's like sort of counterintuitive that you're going to learn more by screaming at your friend in front of you than just like sort of quietly meditating in a library. That kind of makes sense. But they don't know the secret of the koach hamaskil, right? Coming out of your mouth miraculously produces the effort, and the fight with your chavrusa produces further and deeper knowledge that would not come out if you sat there, the brightest guy in the world, and meditated all by yourself. That's why it's good to have a chavrusa, even if he shows up late every day and is a pain in the tuchis. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah.
Would writing or typing be considered in the same kind of light as speaking in this?
Yeah. Potentially even more, right? Because it's even more of a. You ever like try to write your ideas? It's much harder than speaking your ideas. If you're going to write coherent sentences and make reason come out of your hands, yes, it's even deeper in a certain sense, because you're going not only from intellect to speech but to action. So you're drawing the idea down even to a further dimension. The kashem shebeseichel misvasev or. Okay, we're going to the next paragraph, right? Okay. Kashem shebeseichel misvasev or agdei dibur kanal. So just like intellect gains more light from speech, kamo kein hu b'midos gam kein. So too when it comes to your emotions. And this is actually even easier to clearly see with your senses, right? That when you speak, your emotions become amplified. Like, for example, you're going to speak love, sweet nothings of love, right? That when the speech receives at that time from the emotion in your soul, it creates a greater love. When you express your love to a person, you kind of realize how much you love them, and all of a sudden, like you say like a beautiful word of appreciation of love, like all of a sudden you want to go and hug the guy. Before you expressed this love, the emotion was there, but it didn't get amplified in your speech. The fact that you talk about it, and mind you, this is why we are sitting here right now, every single morning for an hour. We want to talk about how much we love God. It's very important to amplify our love for Hashem before we go daven, because you're davening, you want to be in love. This is why Chassidus learning before davening is an essential part of the davening, because when you speak about something, you remind yourself, and it basically brings that out, that emotion. If we right now would conjure up in our minds, right? Ruvi Leibowitz, how do you say his name? Leibovich, right? And just talk about how much we love this kid and how, I remember when he did this and this with Soim. And literally, we all went around and just started telling him how much we love this kid. We'd all love him more because we would remember him, and we would, and the speech itself would bring about our deep feelings for this friend that we have, right? We miss you, Ruvi. Right? It shines the light further, like on the next page. And it affects your soul even more with great love and affection for that thing that you're speaking about. As soon as you start speaking about it, all of a sudden it's like you hatched a deeper love for it. And chiba means appreciate affection. Yeah. This for sure you can appreciate, right? When it comes to anger, this is a clear and obvious thing. If you've ever been a parent or a human, you know all about this, right? When it comes to gevura and anger, this is what's so also dangerous about speaking negatively about somebody, right? Because you get more and more angry feelings about that person when you bring up the topic. And when you are going to go on and on about the topic, it's like you're bringing a visceral hatred for this person every time you lengthen your speech about something, right? This is what the idea, by the way, it says, tracht good wird sein good, think good and it will be good. The Rebbe often points out, if that's true about thought, how much more is it true about speech? Because you actually create realities, even when you think. But now we're learning, when you speak, you bring into existence a particular reality. And the speech, how much more so? Right? So if you're angry with this person, you start to speak about it, the hatred spirals inside of you and starts to get crazy. That's a deep lesson about relationships as well, right? Shh. Who said you have to mamash go on and on? Okay, if you have an hour a week with your therapist, there's some kind of a therapeutic reality that you need to at least hear what's going on. But just to wantonly use this quality is very, very dangerous because you're actually making the situation worse most of the time, right?
Is the therapeutic benefit justifying making it worse?
The therapeutic benefit can be very helpful because you want to also, what's the point of therapy? Is you want to see who you are. You're not really trying to resolve the situation with the other person. You want to see, wow, I didn't realize I love my father that much. Or, you know what I'm saying? Maybe not love. The idea is you hear yourself, you understand yourself. These are hidden realities that you have inside of you that you're not even aware of, and therefore they're going to affect you subconsciously. So by bringing them out, the one good quality is that you bring it into the conscious mind at least. So at least now you can wield it without it sort of controlling you, subconsciously. That's the idea of where it could be useful. But that's medicine. That's not just how you act in regular life, right? Yeah. Okay. You want to ask something?
I mean,
Feel free.
I've seen several times actually in my life and my family's and in friends' lives where they go to a therapist for something and then it becomes much, much worse and it becomes amplified and it becomes a focus of their life instead of just a side issue. So there's a risk.
Well, there's also good therapists and bad ones.
True.
Okay. But the idea is that it definitely can be productive. In fact, I'll say that with such an authority. Who am I? I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist. But in this very book, I am at least called a rabbi. In this very book, there's a very, very famous part of this hemshech, which many of you have even read, most of you have heard of, it's called Hechaltzu. Hechaltzu is part of Ranat, by the way, my friends. And in it, we're not going to necessarily get to it because Ranat is a whole year. We're going to read the first 8 Maimarim, which is the hemshech regarding Rosh Hashanah. But later on, Simchas Torah, I think actually he said it. So it's very connected with this idea. He's speaking about Dibor, and there he talks about the absolute necessity of speaking your problems out with others. It's sort of like and by the way, he himself went to visit Freud. It's a famous story, the Rebbe Rashab. So he whatever he did over there, when a Rebbe goes and sort of recognizes the field of psychology in and of itself by being an actual patient, recorded, that tells you that this is not a treif area of study in and of itself. And it's very connected with this whole year and everything he did, because he's talking about the utility of speaking. It can do very, very many great things. And amongst them is, that's why you have to have the right therapist, is you can see what you're actually saying. In other words, you're not aware, let's say, of your own hatred and what's going on inside of you until you bring this out and another person hears it. And the very fact that there's other ears on this thing should be enough to sort of make you feel the pangs of guilt of that you would not have necessarily realized of the bad behavior that you have, right? When you vocalize what you're actually thinking, you're like, wow, I'm almost like a monster. I gotta deal with that. Whereas you could have gone all your life just being a monster and not realizing that you're a monster unless you said it. So depending on how this is dealt with, if the guy doesn't have Torah mitzvahs in his life and all he knows how to do is scream at people and speak lashon hara anyway, he doesn't know that there's an avera in such a thing, it could go the wrong way. But it's not necessarily because of the therapy. You can't blame the speaking for all these other problems that could come out of it.
Which Rebbe went to?
The Rebbe Rashab, Heinteke, our Rebbe.
Who did he see?
He saw Sigmund Freud. Yeah, it's the whole story. He went saw him, and he gave him his final ruling on the Rebbe Rashab was, the man's mind is too great to be contained by his heart. That was like his psak. He has to go take medicine for that, I guess.
Also, I think you said that Rebbe Rashab is depressed.
Would that be confidential?
Well, we found out. I don't know about this depressed, but okay, let's.
I'm pretty sure his family married into some of the biggest debate. They gave him his daughter.
After he died.
Yalla, we're going to go on. But the point is that speech amplifies, right? And when it comes to anger, which is where we left off, top of the line, top of the page, by speaking, clearly you see that you get angrier and angrier. And therefore, right, there's rules in Torah surrounding this obvious fact. It says, Isaba Reshis Chochma, also a Sfasser book here. It says in Reshis Chochma, Segula Lemidas Akas. Over there it gives you all types of remedies for your midos work. And it says a segula, if you're an angry person, you want to heal yourself and be less angry, what do? This is like the secret of fixing your anger problems, if anyone has. Here you go, free advice. Right? At the time that you're angry, don't talk.
Oh.
That's the advice. Because when you're going to talk when you're angry, what are you going to do? You're going to amplify the anger like many times over, right? Because that's what speech does. It taps into the source of whatever it's working with and opens up a new channel of that very midah, whether it's chokhmah, whether it's anger, whether it's love. So since you don't want love, good, you talk more about love. But you're not allowed to be angry. Angry is a terrible midah. So therefore, when anger is welling up in you, here you have mamash a knob. Don't use your mouth, right? Your mouth is going to amplify your anger inside. It's going to create new streams of anger. Quiet. That's how you deal with that. It's a bad midah. You don't want to amplify it.
When is anger applied?
Anger, according to halacha, can only be applied when you're faking it. Serious. You're not ever allowed to be angry. It's like anger is akin to avodah zarah. It says, right? So when you're allowed to be angry as like a ruse, when you're not really angry inside, you just like triple, quadruple, 100 times check yourself. I'm totally cool, but I'm going to pretend to be angry to get my student out of bed. Because why should you be sleeping in the middle of Chassidus? So there I'm going to if I'm actually angry, no, go do something else. You're not like a fit teacher. You can't actually speak in anger. But it's a tool. Actually, in fact, we're in the midah of Netzach this week. Moshe Rabbeinu was the midah of Netzach, and he famously got angry at Bnei Yisrael. But Chas v'shalom, Moshe Rabbeinu got angry, right? He feigned anger at us. It scared us into submission many times, thanks to his wholly rectified midah of anger. But it's only when you actually are only... Netzach, by the way, is also a midah, which is like an external midah. Right? It's Chesed Gevurah Tiferes is like the real emotions. Netzach is just acting that way. Right? It's basically like forcing yourself to be kind when you don't want to, or forcing yourself to be angry when you don't want to. That's the idea of the Netzach Hod, their external midos. So it means you're not really feeling that anger. You're just acting the anger, right? So that's the only time it's kosher. So, who dibur misvasav hispalus hakas biyoser. And why is the segula to close your mouth when you're angry? Because speech adds excitement to the anger. It adds extra juice. When you don't speak, adarabba, unbelievably so. When you don't let it out, you actually cool it down, right? Not giving it its air suffocates it. Thank you for the analogy, right? Like many taivas, right? It says if you feed them, they get stronger. So if you don't feed the taiva, you suffocate it. It goes out. That's the segula for anger. And so it is with all the midos. We spoke about love and anger. All the midos. When they don't come out in speech, they get smaller and smaller. And the excitement of that midah goes down. And therefore, midos that you want to get bigger and bigger, like your love and fear of God, you should speak about them. Midos that you don't want to come out, like your jealousy, anger, rage, competition, all these things, the secret is keep it to yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is this idea like psychology of if you're like going to suppress emotion?
You missed the psychology lesson. We just finished it. You were here? We talked about Freud and everything? You heard Freud. But okay, I don't want to go back into it. We spoke about when and in what circumstances and contexts you can let it all hang out. Yeah.
So going by this, if we love our brothers, if we're hearing somebody speak out of anger or hostility or jealousy or whatever, does that mean if we're friends with them, we should basically tell them to shut up?
Well, telling them to shut up is speaking negative words. So you just joined the party, right?
Oh.
That's why it says someone who speaks lashon hara, he kills 3 people, right? He kills himself, he kills the one he's speaking about, but he even kills the one who's listening to it. Why? What's the guy do? He's just standing there, right? Because he's allowing this person, he's like to be to have a makabel for his bad behavior. So I don't know if you tell him to shut up, but you basically do that, tell him to shut up in a way where you stop the lashon hara. Yeah, say it in a positive way.
If someone does something that can be challenging for other people, would they be lifting either listed in Mifshal? Because other people might talk about the problem that they're dealing with.
I don't know what you're talking. It's very vague what you're saying. When someone does something to other,
I don't know. Let's say someone left dishes in the sink that weren't clean, right? So people are like, "Oh, who left dishes in the sink?" We're like, "Oh, Johnny did." So they've all said lashon hara, but Johnny left the dishes in the sink that weren't clean. So is he lifting?
I would say the pinnacle culprit there is Johnny.
Why would they be lashon hara? Because he could resolve the situation.
Well, it depends how if you go over if you give him proper tochacha, which is what should happen in this case, which is you kindly and lovingly, privately go over and say, hey, listen, this is a situation. You live with other people. Let's be a mensch. Would you mind cleaning up your dishes? And you do that even 100 times if it takes. That is how you do it, right? In a kind and personal way, not in an embarrassing way where you make his embarrass him in front of other people. But of course, you don't let a person just go with their bad behavior. The Rebbe has a unique way of doing it. When you go over to the person, instead of telling him privately, you listen, you got to clean up your dishes. You say, you know what? I love how you are consistently a cleanly person, and you always, mamish, are careful with yourself around others. You should keep going with that. It's amazing, and you mean it because he has that quality inside. And what did you do by your dibur? You just brought it out, right? Whoa. So you can it's like the Jedi mind trick on this guy, right? You can give a person tochacha by highlighting their positive qualities.
Wow.
No, but he got what you're saying because he's like, you know what, I am a very cleanly person. Oh, let me get someone else's dish. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is how you do it in like a Hasidic way. However,
not even mentioning the.
Listen, I mean, if you got to get the guy's dish out of there, there's different ways to do it. It's a lifetime of skill to properly give a person tochacha. It's a dangerous and difficult road, but it is a mitzvah, and you have to figure out how to improve others' characters in a way that's actually going to improve it. Because if you tell him bad things about himself and hurt his feelings, you're not improving his character. You're not going to make him better. You're just going to make him angry with himself and feel bad and hate you. We live in such a low generation where everyone has no self-esteem and so forth. It's very hard to give a person healthy tochacha.
Wow.
But you have to. That's why we do it in a very kind way.
That's how
Low
society works.
self-esteem.
What's that?
Isn't low self-esteem good in a sense?
What?
Isn't low self-esteem good in a sense?
No. It doesn't really help you. It doesn't help you in much in life.
The difference between low self-esteem and Marari, right?
Yeah. Look, humility and anava. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Sorry. Let me see. Yes, weekends. Let's do one more line. I'm going to let you guys have at it. V'kein hu b'kol amidos. We said this. Let's just do it again. Because she'einam ba'im b'dibar, when they don't get spoken, he's katan v'ismayit, he's palus amidos. It gets lower and lower. The expression of such a midah, the feeling of such a midah. Ad shemis alim lagamri. Guess what? You can actually have them to totally go away. Like you said, you can mamish suffocate and starve it out. If you don't give it any expression to your lashon hara, it's going to stop bothering you one day. It's just going to knock on the door that no one's going to answer. It'll just go away. That's how you fix these things. Lehepech, and the opposite is true. Al yidei shabayim b'dibar misrab misrachavim yoser. Again, hopefully on good midos. If you speak about these midos, you speak about your love of Hashem, you speak about Avos Yisrael, you speak about the milas of learning Torah, mifsoim. In other words, act a chassid, right? Then you will become a chassid. Those are those emotions that you have about that are deep inside of you. Your love of God, your righteousness. Speak about good, positive things, and you'll amplify those midos. You'll become a better person. This next piece, I'm going to give it its proper due because it's awesome. It's actually like very avodadik situation. The next thing he says is v'kein ba'avodas hatefila, that this is all true when it comes to actually davening. And this next page is like really emesdik good advice, practical advice. We can all employ this advice in davening. Let's start with it tomorrow. Let's get our chavrusas going. And let's daven for the success of our activities on Lag BaOmer. I'm heading over there, Bezrat Hashem, now. Okay, I mean, what's that? Yes, go, sir.
What did we say? We said the depth and creates the width and the length.
Yes.
And what is the difference between width and length?
Length is the ability to give over the same idea to lower and lower makablim, like a wise person, a simple person, a child even, right? That you can somehow get it to go long, right? And width is basically that the very idea starts to, you see all different applications of it. You don't go long, you're still talking to the same level, but you broaden it to different points, and many points that are actually branches of that same idea start to come out. So you can, like we said, you can see 49 ways of making the same thing tameh, 49 ways of making the same thing tahor. It's like this thing had more breadth to it than you thought. That's the width of the river. Tov.